Welcome to When Harry Met Board Games. I'm Harry, and today we're beginning a very special series for you all. Today we're beginning the People's Choice Top 100 Board Games of All Time. Now, the premise behind making this video is that there are other similar lists out there, and it's time for them to be challenged and for an alternative to be presented. I have surveyed 3,134 people on Instagram's board game community. This includes reviewers, designers, publishers, influencers, content creators, and overall just board game enthusiasts. And I asked them what were their 5 absolute favorite board games of all time. And the reason why I chose 5 is because I wanted to be the games that they absolutely loved the most. Then I took this data and I assigned different point values according to where these games ranked on their lists. The closer it was to number 1, the more points it was going to contribute towards the making of this list. So the best way to use this list is that if you like a particular genre, a board game category, a mechanism, or even a theme, and you see a game on this list that's highly ranked that falls in line with those mechanisms or board game categories that you're interested in, then you know that these are games that you have to try and maybe even buy. Because like-minded people who think like you and enjoy board games like you, are vouching for these games. Without any further ado, let's get to the first chunk of 10. We're going to be covering games 100 through 91. So the People's Choice number 100 board game of all time is none other than The Seventh Continent. This is a solo or cooperative, almost like a choose-your-own-adventure game where players are exploring the world of the seventh continent. The board or the map of the game is constantly expanding as players adventure and make choices and decisions to enter different areas and encounter different events that present themselves over the course of play. One of the strengths that this game presents is the fact that it has hundreds, if not thousands of hours of gameplay jam-packed into this box here. Also, this game provides a very intuitive game-saving system so that players are able to save their progress and pick up next time right where they left off. This game is ranked number 36 on the BGG's rankings, but on this list, the People's Choice, it is number 100. I'd like to give some shout outs to some of the people that ranked this game as high as their number 1 from the IG community. We have Irish_Meeple. We have Better Ockett, that is Ockett with a 0, not an O. We have J Sleazy 2000. And of course, we have Heathen JR_, ranking this game as their number 1 of all time. And the People's Choice number 99 board game of all time is none other than Battlestar Galactica. I do not own this game, but this game has been very, very popular over the years. And although this game has been long out of print, the people who play it still love it. This game is based on the intellectual property of Battlestar Galactica, which has produced movies and TV shows over the years. This is a cooperative game with a secret traitor where players take on the role of the good guys, but there is one bad guy, or perhaps even 2, who represent the evil Cylon. So this game is a game of social deduction, and we know that those social deduction games are very much beloved within the board game community. Again, as I mentioned, this game is out of print, and I don't know if it ever will be reprinted. Perhaps one day it will be rebranded. I'm sure that with games like this that involve a very popular intellectual property, sometimes it's hard to get the licenses to those IPs, and therefore that prevents the games from being reprinted. By the way, this game on BGG currently, as of this recording, ranks as high as number 81. I'd like to give a shout out to some of the IG accounts that have ranked this game as high as their number 1. First of all, we have Tavern Games 77. We have Orange Charger 1. We have Zone Board Game, and we have our Meeple Overlord, all ranking Battlestar Galactica as high as their number 1. But on the People's Choice overall list, it ranks number 99. The People's Choice number 98 board game of all time is none other than Legends of Andor, designed by Michael Menzel, who is highly renowned within the board game industry as an artist, and his specialty is designing beautiful game boards. Now, this was his first venture into board game design. I say his first because he is working on a game later on this year to be released, which is The Adventures of Robin Hood. But for now, we're going to talk about Legends of Andor, your number 98 board game of all time. This is a fantasy adventure game where players take on the role of heroes, going on adventures, going on quests, encountering different enemies, different bad guys, and fighting them off. This game does have tons of expansions out there, including standalone spin-off games that players can use to vary up their game and get a little bit more of their Andor fix. Also, just recently, there was a children's version or a family version released of this game called Andor Family, or in some circles it's called Andor Junior, for if you want to introduce your children or your younger players to the universe and the world that is Andor. Now, this game ranks as high as 398 on BGG's rankings. That is pretty good, but that's not nearly as high as it ranks here on our People's Choice list, number 98. I'd like to give a shout out to some of the users who ranked this game as high as their number one game of all time. First of all, Vernáculo Erudito. We have Lo Meeple, which is L-O Meeple. And we have Board Game Changers. These people have ranked this game as their number one of all time, but overall on the People's Choice list, it's number 98. The People's Choice number 97 board game of all time is none other than Patchwork, designed by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Lookout Games. This is a classic at this point, very renowned game in the Tetris-like polyomino-shaped tile lane genre, which has kind of exploded over the years thanks to games like Patchwork. In this game, Uwe Rosenberg steps away from his big, grandiose worker placement games, and instead we have a pretty relatively light filler of a game where players are drafting different polyomino-shaped tiles which represent different patches that they're placing on their quilts, which is their player board, and they're trying to occupy as many spots as possible. But while they acquire these different tiles, these tiles have certain button symbols on them which generate them a resource referred to as buttons in this game. Not only are these buttons your money that you use to acquire tiles along the way, but they're also your victory points at the end of the game. So you want to build as efficient of an engine to produce more money and build more tiles as you go along. This game ranks really high on BGG's rankings. It's currently at number 89 as of this recording, so it's really close within the ballpark of where it's ranking here on our People's Choice list at number 97. I'd like to give a shout out to some of the people who ranked this game as high as their number one users on IG. We've got Marathon Meeples, we have Diamond Meeples, and we have Nap Games 715. They ranked this game as number one, but on the People's Choice overall list, it's number 97. The People's Choice number 96 board game of all time is Role Player, designed by Keith Matechka and published by Thunderworks Games. This is a game about rolling dice in order to create an RPG character a la Dungeons and Dragons. You're rolling for their strength, you're rolling for their dexterity, you're rolling for their wisdom and their intelligence and all of the different character attributes that you would typically roll and assign values for in a tabletop role-playing game. But here in this game, this is the game. At least in the base game, you're simply rolling to try to create the best character as possible and create better characters than the opponents around you in the table. You add some expansions and all of a sudden you have monsters to fight, familiars to manipulate, quests and adventures to go on, and now you've got a fuller, more robust RPG-like experience, albeit in a board game, a dice game like Role Player. So this game currently ranks at 196 as of this recording on BGG's rankings. But as you can see, it actually ranks a whole 100 spots higher at 96 on our People's Choice list. Now, I'd like to give a shout out to some of the people who ranked this game as high as their number one. We have DR_Torchwood and we have Roy Kronos. They've ranked this game as high as their number one, but it makes it to our People's Choice top board games of all time at number 96. The People's Choice number 95 board game of all time is none other than the Century series. And I have combined all these games. There are 3 editions that I'm aware of out there. We have Century Spice Road, we have the Golem edition, and I forget off the top of my head the 3rd one. And I just kind of combined them. I will admit that most of the people voting for these games voted for Golem and for Century Spice Road. This game is a very popular game, a very popular gateway style game that I'm actually kind of embarrassed that I haven't actually tried and played yet. This game includes lots of interesting mechanisms such as pool building, some contract fulfillment. Players are doing some network building as they're trying to establish trade routes throughout whatever world the board creates for them. Knowing when to rest, they take a rest action in order to retrieve the cards from their hands in order to have more options going forward. This is a very popular game, as I mentioned, gateway style game. It's given games like Splendor, which was kind of in that prototypical gateway style of game, and it's kind of been a replacement for many people. I wonder where Splendor will rank on this list. Perhaps it's higher, but we're not going to spoil that. Now, Century, the highest ranked Century game on BGG's rankings, is actually the Golem edition, which ranks as high as number 201. But that's nowhere near as close as where we have it on our People's Choice list at number 95. I'd like to give some shout outs to some of the people who rank this game as high as their number 1 IG users. We have Vernus Board Games. We have Alyssa Sue, and that's with 3 E's at the end of Sue. And we have Geeky Gaming Girl, where geeky is spelled with 2 3's instead of 2 E's. These folks have Century, or the Century system of games, ranked as high as their number 1. But as far as our People's Choice list is concerned, this is the number 95 board game of all time. The People's Choice number 94 board game of all time is none other than Clans of Caledonia, another board game I do not have in my collection, but this is a very popular mid to heavyweight Euro game, which is really an economic style game, and lots of people love their economic style games. This game is based off 19th century Scotland. Players are building and upgrading, they're producing goods and resources, and they're trading said resources and trying to be as efficient and successful as possible. This is the style of game that really transports people into that time of history, 19th century, and the kind of game that people just tend to gravitate towards. People love their economic simulations, and Clans of Caledonia is no exception to that rule. Now, this game does rank as high as number 45 on BGG's rankings. That's extremely high. Yet on our list, it's only at 94. Now, I'd like to give some shout outs to some of the people who have ranked this game as high as their number 1. First of all, we have A.V. Bello Certs Seva. That's a very hard name to pronounce, at least for yours truly. We also have Sue Board Games, and Sue is spelled TSU Board Game, and they rank this game as high as their number 1. But as far as our People's Choice top 100 board games of all time is concerned, it's only number 94, Clans of Caledonia. The People's Choice number 93 board game of all time is Star Wars Imperial Assault. This is a Star Wars intellectual property game, which that in and of itself is going to lend it to lots of popularity and lots of people enjoying. This is also a re-implementation of the classic, at this point, dungeon crawling game Descent 2nd Edition. One player is basically taking on the role of the dark side and controlling all of the people on that side, and the other players take on the role of the rebellion. There is an app to make this game completely cooperative, and there were tons of expansions when this game was at its peak of popularity, but I believe lots of that content is no longer available. You might have to get it in the secondhand market. But again, this is a very beloved game from people within the board game hobby. People are absolutely in love with it. It's a Star Wars, again, intellectual property attached to this game that's going to draw lots of eyes and lots of attention towards it. On BGG's rankings, this game is ranked as high as number 44. That is really, really high. On our list, only number 93. I'd like to give some shout outs to some of the users who rank this game as high as their number one game of all time. We have 50 First Board Games, that's 50 First Board Games, and Distilled Game, who have ranked this game as their number one game of all time. However, as far as our People's Choice is concerned, it's only number 93. The People's Choice number 92 board game of all time is It's a Wonderful World, and this is a civilization theme game where the focus tends to be a little bit more future-oriented rather than past-oriented. This game is a card drafting game with simultaneous play, so some of these mechanisms might remind you of other similar themed games out there in the industry. This game includes a very particular phase order when it comes to production. So you want to map out your turn and calculate your actions as efficiently as possible in order to get the most out of all of these different phases. This game is ranked as high as number 167 on Board Game Geek's rankings, which is very good, very exceptional. However, on our list, it's even higher at number 92. I'd like to give a shout out to some of the users who ranked this game as high as their number one. First of all, we have Evonis_Spellencast, and we have Schooling Meeples, who have ranked this game as their number one game of all time. But as far as our People's Choice board games of all time is concerned, it's ranked number 92. And finally, the last game for today's list, the number 91 game as far as the People's Choice is concerned. I do have the box for this one, and it's The Resistance. And this, at this point, this is kind of like the grandfather of all the modern style multiplayer big group social deduction games, where basically players take on a role of team members who are trying to figure out who are the infiltrates, who is not supposed to be there, who's pretending to be a good guy but is really a secret spy. And there's always a few more good guys than there are bad guys, and the bad guys do know that they're working together in this game, and they're trying their best to just go under the radar, right? They want to pass certain objectives in favor of the team in order to give the impression that they're loyal, but they also want to find those sneaky moments when they can make the team fail in their objectives and deviate the blame or point the blame somewhere else so that somebody else gets the suspicion casted on them and they can walk out clean, and hopefully long term, they can make all the objectives of the team fail. This is a very simple social deduction game at this point. When you think of all the modern games that have kind of built upon the skeleton, on the framework of the Resistance, and you go back and you play Resistance and you see how simple it really is compared to some of these more complex modern social deduction games. However, its simplicity can make it more favorable as a game that you want to replay over and over again, and again as a gateway game to teach your friends or introduce them into the world of social deduction games. This game, as far as BGG's rankings are concerned, finds itself, as of this recording, as high as number 273. So that's much lower than we have it here on this list. I'd like to give a shout out to some of the users who have ranked this game as high as their number one. First of all, we have Choice Game, or Choice Game. This is CHOIS_game. And we have Feuding Foodies Game, who have ranked this game as their number one. But as far as our People's Choice list is concerned, it's number 91. And that's it for today's video, guys, for the first in the series of top 100 People's Choice board games of all time. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Consider subscribing down below so you will not miss the rest of this series as we continue sharing what you, the people, think are the greatest games of all time. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.